And you're going to hear all the coughs and sniffles and everything else that normally we have time to take out. It has nothing to do with our studio, which is excellent, and I'm very enthusiastic about this, but has everything to do with the fact that we want to get this out immediately. Meanwhile, I'm watching John and Tiff take pictures of each other.
I'm trying to get pictures every time I take a picture.
Okay, so this is our special WWDC episode. We are recording it the day of the keynote, and it is right after the keynote, or I'm sorry, right after the afternoon session. We are at the Macworld Studios, so thank you very much to Jason Snell for letting us crash his studio and use his equipment in order to get this podcast to you lickety-split and not sound like garbage. So thank you very much, Jason Snell. Everyone tweet him a big thank you just so his inbox explodes.
At Jay Snell. Or you can listen to his podcast, The Incomparable, on 5x5.
Which...
Email Marco!
So some stuff happened today. Today was a busy day. And John, do you have any thoughts about today by chance?
We should have talked about a plan of attack for this podcast, because there's way too much that happened today for us to discuss on one episode of the podcast. No doubt we will be talking about these things for many episodes to come, and it probably would have been a good idea for us to have a plan of like, okay, today we're just going to talk about like iOS 8, or we're just going to talk about Swift, or we're just going to talk about but we don't have a plan because we are disorganized.
Are you suggesting that you did not do your homework?
Oh, we didn't know what was going to be announced until today, so how could we, But anyway, I think that what do you want to do? Do you want to focus on a particular area, or do you just want to give broad, sweeping stuff? Because if we want to do everything, we need to have a list of bullet points and say, okay, we got to talk about this, that, and get through them all. Otherwise, we're gonna dive into one of these topics and spend the whole show on it, which I'm also fine with. But.
Well, let's just start going down the list, and if we end up going off on a tangent that lasts 12 hours, then so be it. So what did we see today? Well, firstly, on the way in, we got celebrated by the line people, which was weird. I've never seen that before. So
yeah.
As you're on your way in, so you wrap around the block a couple times, and then at something like 7:30, well, something around 7:30, they let you into Moscone, and you end up going to the second level of Moscone. And so you go up these escalators and we hear cheering. We hear cheering going on. And I'm thinking to myself, what is happening? And sure enough, they had, I guess they're Apple employees, but they had all these Apple employees lined up saying like, all right, yeah, be excited. And it's like 7:30 in the morning. We're all exhausted and jet lagged. And they're trying to pump us all up. And I'd never seen that before. And it was odd.
That's what they do with Apple Store openings, right? They have the Apple Store retail employees come out and applaud for everybody. Like, yeah, I mean, at least at that point, people know what they're excited about. But on the way into the keynote, we don't know what we're going to be excited. And there was plenty in the keynote worth applauding. Had we known what we were going to see, we would have been jazzed as well, probably.
Yeah.
But we didn't, so it was just a bunch of tired people.
Yeah, it was different, to say the least. Then they tried to get a WWDC chant going, which was extremely, I don't know, it was odd. But then we made it into the keynote room. That worked out well. And the keynote started fairly slow, I thought. I didn't think it had that much speed to it. And everyone seemed really confident and really relaxed. And I didn't know what to make of it. So what was what was some of the first stuff they covered? I didn't start taking notes until about halfway through. So I don't know if you guys... All right, this is an accidental podcast.
I mean, one of the things I noticed first was just like the mood of everyone. Like, Tim comes out, and Tim is relaxed and laid back, and this is a side of Tim we haven't seen a lot of, if any, really. He was kind of fiery, and he was taking jabs at Google and Windows and stuff, and it was the kind of thing we've seen that from Jobs in the past. But Tim has always shown a more reserved approach to those usually, and he'll put in jabs here and there that are more subtle in the past. But I think this was the first time we saw him really feel free to just dig in, and he seemed, and I think what we saw play out is that the reason he was so confident and laid back, which is the same reason that all the presenters were so confident and laid back, is because they knew they had a kick-ass lineup that they were announcing, and they were very proud and confident in what they were about to show us, and we didn't know yet. So at the time, it was just like, wow, that's they seem like they're really relaxed today, and it flowed very well. It was much more put together, much more seamless than I would say any Apple event in the last 3 years.
I would say that he seemed less rehearsed. Not that, I mean, we know they rehearsed like crazy, right? But in in Tim Cook's first several keynotes, you could tell that he was well rehearsed, and he would come out there and say what he was going to say, and it was like, oh, I can see that he is saying something that he has pre-scripted. Whereas, I mean, now it was the same exact thing this time, but he sounded less rehearsed. So again, because he was relaxed. As for the rest of the keynote, there was so much stuff in this keynote that whole important technologies got like a slide and 5 seconds. And it was like, wait, what was that? And then they're on to the next thing because there just wasn't enough time. And I mean, it's obvious they're trying to keep it to a 2-hour keynote. They're trying not to go 3 hours, 4 hours, whereas other companies, I mean, Google's done that. I think Microsoft's gone really long. Sony, if you want to go to the gaming space, like there have been press conferences where when people have a lot to announce, they say, well, we've got a lot to announce and everybody will love it. And they just go. And Apple was like, we have a lot to announce, but we're going to hold it to 2 hours because we've got a schedule to keep. So there was so much in this keynote that there were things that got one slide that are more significant than things that got like 10 minutes in previous years.
Yeah, it was. You could tell, like, you know, that we were. What I love about this is that so much of it was a surprise. You know, there were very few spoilers of any value here. Even like, you know, one of the biggest spoilers, Health Book, was kind of wrong in, you know,
and
how
it was like an asterisk on the end of the presentation. It was like, oh yeah, we got this health thing, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was like we said, the possibility of like, you know, them introducing APIs for integration with third-party things, and then maybe something of their own in the future. And so the Apple was not going anywhere near anything wearable or anything today. It's like we have a bunch of APIs, and third-party applications can use it, and I think that'll be great, guys. Right? Okay, moving on. I mean, it was one in the scope of this keynote. It was a minor announcement.
Yeah, it was really wild. And I got to say, to back up just a smidge, that I loved snarky Tim Cook. Oh, I thought it was great. I really, really did. And I think that the corny jokes that Apple made like during last WWDC, and I can't think of them off the top of my head. Maybe it was with Eddie Q and iWork, and he did like the band poster or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like that was so corny and contrived. And this year, with the exception of the hair thing, which I think we've taken a little too far, I thought everything else was well done. I thought it was the right amount of snark, the right amount of humor, which is not something I'm used to seeing from Apple. I mean, Jobs had his own shticks here and there, but generally speaking, they've been fairly by the book, and I loved this slightly more casual Apple. The titles in the WWDC sessions where it was like, well, wouldn't you like to know? And, well, we wish we could tell you. I love this new Apple. I don't know, John, as the old man of the three of us in terms of Apple lineage, what do you think about this like more casual setup?
Well, the thing about the humor and the jokes is like there's two parts to that. One is how relaxed the people are making things, and we already said like the people seem relaxed because they were confident because they had a lot of good stuff to show, and because they're experienced. Like when they brought out the newer people who hadn't presented as many times, they were shakier, kind of like Craig was in the beginning, but now he's more experienced. But the second thing is the jokes were just as silly and corny as they've always been. But when you're announcing things that get the audience excited, the audience is predisposed to forgive your mistakes because they're so jazzed about what you just showed before. And so that is the effect. Basically, if you have great things to show, if you have announcements that the audience is going to love, they will also be in the mood to laugh at your stupid jokes. And if you're showing stuff that's boring and you make a stupid joke, you're like, not only you're not entertaining me and releasing things that I want, but you're making a stupid joke and wasting my time. So it's all about audience atmosphere. And we were, as the announcements rolled on, we were all very receptive to anything.
That's true. And I think that the pace in general seemed not that brisk in the beginning, but by the end, my goodness, it was a fire hose just getting leveled at all these developers and in the best possible way. But things got fast. And this comes back to what you were saying earlier about, oh, yeah, well, we've got this health thing. Oh, yeah, and we've got these new dev tools. Oh, yeah, and we've got this new language. And it was unbelievable how quick it was. There was a lot happening today.
There was also just a level of refinement that we haven't seen in a while, like, and even with Jobs, like this isn't really a Steve Jobs thing. Is even with Jobs, there were some weird and sloppy moments in the events. For the last couple of years, Apple's events have seemed stuffy, almost sterile, kind of uptight. And I was even worried because when we saw Eddie Q and Jimmy Iovine last week, I think Eddie Q did not come off that well either. I think he came off a little uptight there, and so I was kind of worried, that's kind of the Apple we've seen recently, and. Like last year, like you said, some of the jokes were kind of overplayed or stale. They ran too many videos last year.
Yeah, that's another good point.
Yeah, and then they kept running the same video for like 3 events in a row. Like it was this year, they ironed out all those bugs in their presentation, and it was just a smooth presentation from start to finish. There were no remote control cars. It was just very, very well done. And I mean, what they announced, I don't even know where to begin. It was just a lot.
I think we can begin with OS 10 because I think despite people thinking that this is going to be, and us also saying this was going to be a big OS 10 release, and it is visually, I guess, from the user's perspective, I think it was the smallest of the things that they announced today because they put up the big slide. It's going to be OS 10, iOS 8, and then dev,
Right.
like developer tools, right? And of those three things, like they led with the smallest one, like they always do. You save the best for last. So I think we could dispense with OS 10 pretty quickly if you want to cover that in the beginning.
Oh, so your review is going to be short as well then?
It might be. I don't know. I mean, the thing about it is, I mentioned to you guys before that, a lot of the things they put in the iOS section or in the developer tools section of the keynote also apply to OS 10. It's that we don't think of them that way because, anything that's shared between OS 10 and iOS is going to go into the iOS session because that's what everyone cares about because the Mac is a smaller platform. But that stuff applies to OS 10 as well. So I'm not entirely sure. But I think we can start with OS 10. And what we thought was going to happen was a big visual refresh. What we got was a big visual refresh.
Was it that big a visual refresh, though? I mean, it's pretty big.
I was actually surprised how radical it wasn't.
Yeah, and that's exactly my point.
What did you expect that you didn't see?
Well, I expected everything to be all white and thin and wispy, and it wasn't. It still looks like Mac OS 10.
I agree.
It's still... It's not a jarring change. It is an evolutionary change, and it's exactly, I think, the kind of change that was warranted. They didn't need to totally throw away everything. Remember, and we'll probably talk about this on Gruber's show, but remember, Gruber was even saying, what are they going to do about shadows, about layering windows? And it turns out they didn't do anything different. We still have window shadows because windows still are windows. They still look like windows. They're still layered. It wasn't as radical of a change as I think a lot of people were assuming or fearing that it would be. And I mean, and there are a few weird issues with it that I'm not thrilled with. I think the translucency difference between the sidebar is translucent to the desktop and then the title bar is translucent to the view under it within its own window, and there's these weird layering things that are conceptually a little odd, but I think overall it looks great, and it looks like a nice modernization of what they already had rather than throwing it all away and making something totally radically different.
Well, here's the thing about that new look. It's not the type of thing where you're going to install this new OS and all your apps are going to look like the apps that they showed in the keynote because this stuff doesn't get enabled by default. You have to opt into it. And so Apple's apps are going to look like that. Apple's apps are going to have title bars with the window widgets right in line with them, like they do already in some apps, like the App Store app is like that, I think, and a couple other ones. And Apple's apps are going to have a translucent sidebar, and Apple's apps are going to have, translucent title bar. But it's not going to transform all your apps into this crazy translucent thing. So for the most part, what most people's Macs are going to look like is their existing apps with different title bars, different fonts in the menus, and a different dock, but everything else looking more or less the same. And I don't know if Apple will be able to get everybody on board hey, everybody, make all your sidebars translucent, make all your title bars translucent, and tuck the content underneath it. I don't know if they're going to go in that direction. So I'm trying to think about what real Macs will look like running Yosemite, not what we saw in the keynote.
Yeah, I don't know. The other thing that struck me about the visual refresh was when I saw Windows 7 for the first time, and this is when I'd already had a Mac at this point, and I was already all in on OS 10, I felt like, what did they call the Windows 7 refresh, the visual refresh? I can't remember now. It doesn't matter. But anyway, where everything
got...
It's
not Metro, right? It's something
No,
something
it was pre-Metro. But anyway, the point is it was all very translucent and similar ideas. And I actually thought from the very first time I saw it that the Windows 7 stuff looked pretty good. I agree with Marco, especially with this odd amount of translucence where I'm translucent to one thing here, but I'm translucent to this other thing there.
It's Arrow, by the way. Feedback from the chat, sorry.
It's what? Oh, Arrow. Yes, thank you. So Arrow, I thought, looked great from the beginning, and I don't even know if Microsoft has backpedaled on that or not. But this new OS 10 setup, I look good, but I have my reservations.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't think your screen is going to look like that. I think it's going to look like what it looks like now, and then Safari might look different, and Mail will look different. Most of your apps will look the same.
That's a fair point.
The whole thing with the translucency is to what end? To what end why are these things translucent? That is always the question, and it's Apple's job, I think, to justify why someone would want to do this to their application. Because there are downsides in terms of readability, in terms of variability. Is this something that people want? Does it look really awesome? And people like brush metal. The justification was basically people think it looks cool, and so everybody made their apps brush metal. Whether it was or not, that was if you were to ask Apple why should people do this, be like, well, people think it's cool, and they did think it was cool, and they use brush metal everywhere. Well, I don't know if people think this translucence is all that cool. I mean, iOS 7 has it as well. Granted, the APIs were not as open, so everyone couldn't go hog wild with it, but it will really depend on whether people think it's worth adopting these things. Because if they don't, it's just OS 10, but everything, candy-colored and iOS 7ified.
Yeah, but didn't they say during the keynote that the idea was to give you some context within your document, which I don't really buy.
Yeah, but what does
that
mean? What does the context mean?
Exactly.
Previously, I wasn't aware that my document continued off the top of this page, but now that I can see the green image showing through my title bar, I'm aware that it goes off the top. Like, how does that provide you any more context than simply clipping the image at that point, or God forbid, always showing a scroll bar so you could see the scroll position? Like, I forget which word they were using. I don't think it was context, but they did have a talking point of like how translucency provides you. Like one thing was like you can pick your desktop background, and that will influence how your apps look to let the personality of your desktop background show through in your apps. Is that something that people want? Do they want the personality of their desktop background showing through in their apps? Do they just want to use their apps to like read their mail and stuff, and they don't want to see the desktop image behind it? It looks like a big mottled mess. But again, these are all opt-in things. Your apps aren't just going to all of a sudden become translucent. Apple is obviously opting into them, and they will be a good test bed, and it'll be interesting to see if this is something people want. Whether developers think it looks cool and they just ship it to people and then people complain, or developers never even ship it and it just ends up being a different looking Mac OS.
So anything else on the visual refresh? Because, I think that's pretty much all I had to say about it.
I like the idea of them redoing the trying to constrain the icons into the different arrangements of having circle icons and square icons, and having all of the little slanty. They showed them, people were taking pictures of the iMac screen up, but I'm sure there's more up, showing all the little slanted rectangle icons all looking identically slanted and everything. That's a reasonable unification. It's a nice middle ground between people thinking, OS 10 is going to use round recs for all its icons. It's not.
Right.
They are still distinct shapes. And again, I think third parties might just ignore this and say, well, that's good for you, Apple. You can do whatever the hell you want with your icons, but we're still making our icons look like we want. So I think there will be a continued tension between what Apple is doing with Yosemite and what third-party developers do with it. And it might be a little weird, kind of like iOS 7 is, where some apps just don't come all the way on the iOS 7 train. So you've got these apps that, their icons haven't changed since iOS 6, and their interfaces may be different, but they don't look like iOS 7.
They still don't have the iOS 5 or the iPhone 5 screen size support.
not that bad, but yeah.
All right, we are sponsored this week first by our friends at Igloo. Igloo is the intranet you'll actually like, and it's about to get even better. Igloo's next release, Unicorn, is coming this summer. With it comes social task management, a brand new feature fully integrated throughout the Igloo platform, providing the perfect balance between project management and getting your day-to-day work done. You can manage projects with task lists, optimize for large groups of people. You can assign tasks from any piece of content, like requesting changes be made in a document, and you can create personal tasks that are assigned to you or another person. And you can see all your tasks in one unified view. You can learn more about this at igloosoftware.com/ATP, or you can come see Unicorn in person. Igloo is hosting an event in Toronto, which I think is in Canada, on June 12th. With customer presentations by Hulu and Nextel International. So go to igloosoftware.com/Toronto to register for that event. Otherwise, once again, go to igloosoftware.com/ATP to check out Igloo, the internet you'll actually like, and all the cool stuff they're working on these days. Thanks a lot to our friends at Igloo for sponsoring our show once again.
Yeah, speaking of Igloo and other like web type applications, all the web apps that started to change their look to look like iOS 7 after iOS 7 came out?
Hey, I'm just glad that websites aren't still trying to look like iOS old, because that looked terrible on websites.
But a lot of people who have either web components to their products or have web apps took the hint from Windows 8 as well, but also iOS 7, especially in the Mac world, to make their websites look like that. And with the change in look of OS 10 now, that turns out to be a good move. I mean, even Apple is doing it. Like they showed what the App Store looks like. That's what they were showing, right? The new App Store app on the Mac looks all different. Like that look, that kind of like flat candy-colored look. If you did that everywhere across your website on your iOS device, and now the Mac has switched over to it, that was good planning, because people like that look. It's simple, it's clean, and now it is across the entire Apple platform.
Yeah. So this keynote was, to some degree, wonderful and terrible for me. And it was wonderful because they announced that we're getting AirDrop between devices, between OSs, I guess I should say, between Yosemite and between iOS 8, which is great. But the downside was that we also learned later on that there's this handoff thing that where if you're, let's say, working on an email or something like that, and then you want to finish that email, you're working on it on your phone, you want to finish it on your computer, and then all of a sudden you can just pitch this email through the ether, through the air onto the computer, and that sounds awesome, and I'm really enthusiastic about it. However, I think, and they never confirmed or denied, that that's probably using Bluetooth Low Energy, and none of my Macs have Bluetooth Low Energy on them.
It could be using AirDrop, because if AirDrop works between them, and it's supposed to be, the whole idea is it's proximity based, so it's not.
Right.
It's not like they mentioned, like, oh, you won't have things from your home showing up on your work computer or vice versa. So it could be Bluetooth Low Energy. It could also be AirDrop, which uses that like ad hoc Wi-Fi networking thing. I think. But all of it requires developer support. Like, this is not magic. So Apple's Mail, if you use Apple Mail on your Mac and you use Apple Mail on your iOS device, then yeah, you can do that. But what if you use something else on either one of those places? Or what if the things you use, the developer hasn't added support for this? It still seems like a thing that you have to do, and it could kind of be fidgety enough that, like, it demos really well, but I don't know. Like, I understand the frustration they're getting at, because I know when I'm doing something on one device and I want to just transition to it over there, it would be nice if everything picked up, but this requires so many parties to cooperate and everything to work for that handoff to work. That's like, getting the handoff to work could end up feeling like, from the user's perspective, more trouble than it's worth. Like, maybe it's just better to just save it as a draft and then go over and then pull up the draft over there. Like the old things that we used to be. You know, it demos well, and I think it's a good idea for this product, but I'm skeptical about how seamless it will really be in real life. So I think we'll have to see.
I think it's going to be one of those things like notification syncing between devices, and how, you know, we were talking last week how, like, there seems to be this grace period in current infrastructure that we have now where, like, if you get an iMessage and you're at your computer, if the window's focused, then your phone won't buzz in your pocket, but if you don't attend to it within a few seconds, your phone will buzz, and, like, it's that kind of thing, and they have worked on that over time, and it has gotten better over time. It's still not perfect, but it's gotten better. This is probably going to be the same kind of thing where it's going to start out probably a little wonky, and then get better over time, because it's probably built on that exact same system.
I'm hopeful that it is the, like, peer-to-peer Wi-Fi thing. I'm skeptical, but I'm hopeful, and we'll see what happens. But what else did we learn OS 10 wise? Well,
I mean, one thing that's very interesting, I think, and I don't know if we're ready to talk about this yet, is the iCloud Dropbox, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about whether they would backpedal. Would they just decide to show the file system? Or would they try to figure out something else? And this is kind of like an interesting compromise. What it seems to me is that they wanted to have their cake and eat it too, which is they wanted to have the existing iCloud experience, which is just like, there's no file system. You don't have to worry about that. Every app owns its own files. Everything's in iCloud. Everything is ubiquitous and available everywhere. They wanted to keep that because I think that's good, right? But they also wanted to add the ability for people who knew what they were doing to have something that was more like Dropbox. And they didn't want to destroy one with the other. So they want to make it so, like, if you're using the system the way you've been using it for the past several years, it will look the same to you. But if you know what to do, then suddenly you get the equivalent of an open save dialog box that's showing you, like, you know, the iCloud sidebar item suddenly shows you documents. And what I think will happen is, once you put iCloud in the sidebar of the Finder, people are going to click on it. People are going to learn they can make new folders there, and people are going to use it. And they'll end up using it like Dropbox. And I think Dropbox has proven that if you it doesn't make any sense, but if you constrain the world of the file system to a single place that they can hang their hat on, like, it's in my Dropbox or it's on my desktop, people are fine with that. It doesn't matter that the number of levels of hierarchy they create under that are the same as they could make anyplace else. It just gives them a starting point and it makes them feel comfortable. So now, with iCloud in the sidebar, that for people who, imagine someone who gets a computer like, oh, you should install Dropbox, and you know they can't install Dropbox. You know that phrase, you should install Dropbox, is like Greek to them. Like, well, I don't know what you mean. I don't know how to install software. I don't know, do I go to a website? Do I do something? Do I download a disk image? Do I get it? Like, nobody knows. And it's just like, look, go to your Finder. In the sidebar, there's a thing called iCloud. Anything you put there, when you're, you know, you can put stuff there and you'll see it everywhere. And that is like Dropbox. It's a folder that syncs. And now iCloud, it's a cloud that syncs, we hope. Yep. I mean, all this, we'll have to see how reliable it is, but it's a reasonable compromise. I like that it acknowledges the fact that Apple has failed to come up with something so much better that eliminates all the evil of the file system. And I think they've taken less of Dropbox is like the file system is big and confusing, but if you constrain it to this one place, whether it makes sense or not, people suddenly are able, a larger group of people are suddenly able to deal with it. Not everybody, but a larger group.
Yeah, and I think there's also, this has a huge value in PR for Apple, because now, like, we've been talking before, like iCloud is this umbrella term that refers to lots of different things, most of which are behind the scenes. In fact, Eddie Q talked about this in the Jimmy Iovine thing last week. This is now a very public-facing version of iCloud, and it works the way people expect modern, quote, cloud things to work. It's a cloud sync service for this folder full of files. That's exactly what people want from a cloud service today. For the most part, there's things you build on top of that, but this is what people want. And this is going to be this big thing in everyone's face who uses a Mac, saying, look, it's iCloud, it works, we get it, we're in the cloud, we are doing web services, and they mostly work most of the time.
and it comes with your Mac. It uses the iCloud account that they make you set up when you install the OS or when you set up the device. Like, you don't have to go to a third-party way. All the advantages of being part of the platform. Like, all those barriers that prevented people from getting Dropbox installed. And in fact, I think there are new APIs in OS 10 and in iOS, and I guess we'll probably talk about the whole extensions. Is that what they call it? Extensions?
I believe that's right.
That was in the iOS section, but extensions apply to OS 10 as well. And so there are extensions in OS 10 that will let, for example, Dropbox make their application better. So Apple is not just saying, oh, iCloud is built in and we'll be able to do Dropboxy-like things, but in fact, we're helping Dropbox out here too, or helping ourselves out as well. For example, in not having Dropbox in-memory hack the Finder to put those little badges on all your icons to show like the green, and like they've got an official API for that through extensions, which is their safe mechanism for extending functionality. And I think the notification widget things are similar, aren't those under the umbrella of extensions?
I believe so.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know. The iCloud Drive thing struck me as so interesting for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it was the tangible manifestation of Dropbox as a feature, not a product. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And then secondly, this was I believe the first thing we saw of a series of different features and enhancements and products and whatnot that are all heavily relying on iCloud. And maybe I'm amongst a group of people that are giving iCloud a bad rep for no really good reason anymore.
No, there are good reasons.
Well, okay, so either way, but they're like, if they doubled down on secrecy, which it appears they have, they've like quadrupled down on iCloud being the bus for their entire ecosystem. And in principle, that's wonderful, but that's a lot of pressure to put on a system that I'm not so sure can handle it.
They were saying a lot of the right things. Like, for example, I forget, maybe this was in the State of the Union, we're not supposed to talk about it or whatever, but one of the services they were talking about, they mentioned push notifications in connection with it. And as we've said on past shows, like, push notifications is one of the things that's under the iCloud umbrella that seems to work pretty well. And we're all hoping that, like, more like that, less like iCloud Core Data. And this presentation was, I mean, maybe it's just optimistic thing, but like when they showed these things, I'm like, I'm optimistic that these new things will be more like push notifications and less like the things that haven't gone well. Although iMessage is, I mean, they added tons of stuff to iMessage as well, and that still continues to be a little bit weird and creepy. So yeah, you're right. They really put a lot of eggs in this iCloud basket. And basically what Apple is doing is, I'm assuming, forcing themselves to get better at this crap. Because it will be disastrous if they continue to fumble and keep putting more and more important things into the iCloud basket.
I'm actually pretty confident in what they're doing, because it seems like, Casey, you said, like, they're building a lot of this stuff on what appears to be the push notification / iMessage part of iCloud. And that seems to be the part that is operating at probably the biggest scale and is probably the most reliable. I know people have had iMessage problems here and there, but we don't know how much that is related to the client side software. It seems like the server side end of that, the push notification, the whole push system, has been really rock solid for the vast majority of its existence, and certainly recently. So I'm actually pretty confident that the iCloud part of this is probably not going to be a problem. The other parts of it, the client side code might be.
Right.
But it seems like the iCloud services end of what they're doing, and people, iCloud Core Data Sync was a disaster, but that was also probably mostly a client side and design issue of design of that capability.
I mean, or even like documents in the cloud, or those, like, a lot of those things kind of work, but had weird things about them, or so they started off as synchronous, and then they made them asynchronous, and there's like not a lot of visibility. And when it doesn't work, even today, like if you launch Apple's Notes app, and there are notes that you put in on your iOS device, the Notes app just sits there for a while, and then eventually your notes show up. You hope, but if they don't, like you have no recourse. Like there's no visibility, and that's why moving to like iCloud in the sidebar and putting stuff there for documents. I mean, at least that gives you some visibility into what's going on. But the other APIs, but I mean that's still a problem with their cloud system. They're making it better from a developer's perspective, so developers can tell what the hell's going on. But from a user perspective, man, this stuff better work, because you have nowhere to go if it doesn't. You just stare at your app. There's not even a busy indicator. You're just like, is my stuff there? Is it going to come?
It's so true. Now, aren't they? But they did mention, and I think this was in the NDA session, so I'll be very vague, but I believe they mentioned that they're dog fooding a lot of the stuff they're providing to developers. So a lot of the stuff that they're giving developers, they're using those APIs for their own new features and applications.
Yeah, that was heartening. Although it's like it's helpful. What that means is that if they did a bad job, Apple will know about it. That is the best thing about it, is that at least they'll know they did a bad job. It doesn't necessarily mean they did a good job, and it's kind of bad if they didn't, because now they're screwing up their own services. Their own headline features are screwed up by their own bad APIs. But presumably because they are dog fooding it, they'll find out that it's bad, and it won't just be this we won't have to wait for like developer backlash. Like Apple's own engineers would be like, your server-side crap is broken, and I can't ship my app because it's broken.
So is there anything else that's fun and exciting to talk about?
Oh, and before we get off OS 10, I just want one more thing.
We're not done with OS 10 yet.
The notifications center sidebar and the widgets there, and like everyone's like, what does that mean for dashboard? Where is dashboard? And they didn't say anything about it. I'm pretty sure dashboard's still there in Yosemite. Jason can nod his head because, he nods his head.
They didn't say. The implication is that you should probably not get too attached to dashboard.
Right, but anyway, like this is a grace period, it seems like. Apple said nothing about the future of dashboard, but anyone who knows anything about Apple will know that the future of dashboard is not bright. And this is not...
I'm saying next year it's gone.
Yeah, and this is... Jason just pulled up dashboard in Yosemite. I'm staring at it. Anyway, it's still there. But like, this is not news. Like, dashboard has been kind of stagnant and just sitting there doing nothing for many, many years. It is a pretty old feature. What does it come at 10.4 or something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
It's been around for a long time. I use it every day. I still think it's great, but it's clear that it's not just like this year that Apple decided to kill it. It died of natural causes, essentially. So dashboard is still there. You can continue to use it in Yosemite. I don't know how much longer it will be around, and I bet most people won't mourn it, even though I will, because I think it's kind of cool. And you can't, it's not a direct replacement. Like the notification center is a skinny little sidebar, whereas dashboard took up your whole screen. But third-party opportunity, people.
We are also sponsored this week, once again, by our friends at Warby Parker. Go to warbyparker.com/ATP. Warby Parker is a new concept in eyewear, although it's only new to you if you haven't listened to our show ever. Warby Parker, it was a collaboration between four friends, and here's the thing. They believe that eyewear should not cost a fortune. It should be available and affordable to everyone. Eyeglasses should not cost as much as an iPhone. That's ridiculous. So they have prescription eyeglasses, very high quality, and they start at just $95, including the prescription lenses. They even have a titanium collection starting at just $145, including prescription lenses, that includes premium Japanese titanium, French non-rocking screws, and all sorts of other niceties. All their glasses include anti-reflective and anti-glare coatings at no additional cost. All of their glasses come with a hard case, which is awesome, and a cleaning cloth. There's no additional items you need to purchase. They're not trying to nickel and dime you. It's great. They make buying glasses online easy and risk-free. Now, you're probably afraid, if you think about buying glasses online, you've never done it before, you're probably afraid, like, how will I know how they will look on my face? They have a couple of ways to address this. They have these awesome online tools. You can use your webcam. They will show, they can even use webcam to help you measure in case your eye doctor won't give you the prescription details about your sizing, which some of them are weird about. They can even help you measure, and it's very good, very accurate. And so you can preview everything there, and that's cool. But the best thing about Warby Parker, I think, is that they have this home try-on program. So you can go online, you can pick out up to 5 styles of glasses that you think might look good on you or look good in the preview thing, and they will send them to you, and you can try them on in your home, risk-free. They send them to you for free. They come with a prepaid return label. You send them back for free. You can try them on in your home, and you can see how they look on you in person. And then if you want to buy them, you can. If you don't want to buy them, no problem. And not only that, if these people aren't nice enough already, for every pair of glasses that they sell, they distribute a pair of glasses to someone in need through recognized vision charities. And this is great because there are so many people who lack access to eyeglasses who need, and if you need glasses, you need them to live. You need them to work. You need them if you're a kid in school. You need them to learn, to see what's on the board. It's so important to people. And so Warby Parker donates a pair of glasses for every pair they sell to people in need. So it's really fantastic. Anyway, go to warbyparker.com/ATP to learn more and to check out their awesome glasses. And that's it. So thanks a lot to Warby Parker for sponsoring the show once again.
Yeah, I've told the story 100 times, and I'll make it really quick. But when I got a set of Warby Parker sunglasses, I put in like four pairs, maybe 3 pairs of sunglasses that were my stereotypical, like, this is Casey's style. And then I put in a pair or 2 that were just completely not the sort of sunglasses I would normally buy. And sure enough, the ones that I ended up choosing were one of the ones that I didn't expect to like. So it actually ends up working out pretty well. Really quickly, real-time follow-up with regard to Dashboard. I believe the quote, as I was informed by Jason, was, we suggest you quickly adopt this new technology with regard to the notification center, which is basically Apple code for this is going to die, prepare yourselves.
Yeah, and Dashboard was like a weird one-off thing with these HTML kind of widgets or whatever, whereas their replacement is part of a larger system that spans both iOS and OS X, this extensions system. And I mean, maybe that's just an umbrella term and there's no real relation technologically. We haven't learned the details yet. But they're using that term to say, you can write extensions for, which is, I mean, people in that audience don't know, but extensions, we already used that term once on the Mac. And it has bad connotations. These are different. And on iOS, it has a totally different thing, which we'll get to when we talk about iOS 8. But these new widget things in the sidebar are part of that system. It's a way to extend the system. And I look forward to new ways to extend the system. Because what this means is Apple has basically come up with a way for both iOS and the Mac for people to write system extensions. To extend the functionality of the system. And that whole idea has been like, yeah, all right, we'll let you put an icon in the menu bar, but you should really make it black and white because we don't like, and we won't let you move yours around. We can only do that with ours. Yours just go in a random order, tough luck, download bartender. So I'm hoping this is the dawning, certainly on iOS, it's the dawning of a new age of extending the system. And I'm hoping on the Mac as well that it's a sort of a renaissance of extending the Mac in interesting and safe ways and Apple-approved ways versus the old way, which is just like third parties figuring out how to get it done.
The keynote as a whole, and perhaps this relates more to iOS than the Mac, but I felt like the keynote as a whole was an exercise in Apple doing all the things that we never thought they'd do. They gave us a whole bunch of gave us a whole bunch of photo storage. They are allowing extensions, like you were saying, both on OS X, which is to be expected, but also on iOS, including stuff as wild as replacing the system keyboard. And there were a couple other things. Now I'm drawing a blank, but there were, Swift. There are all these
entire extension thing. I mean, that's a huge thing right there.
But these are there are all these things that I think the three of us, everyone really have been saying, oh, they've got to do this, but they're never going to do it because they're Apple, they're stubborn, they're belligerent.
But I don't think it's like a stubbornness or like a philosophical objection. I mean, a lot of us say like, oh, previously there was a philosophical objection and now that has changed. But with a lot of these things, it's like Apple always wanted to do them, but it had to wait for certain things. And on iOS, which I guess we'll transition to soon anyway, but like it was... And iOS was like, we don't have the CPU to do that. We don't have the memory to do that. Right. We don't have the whatever, like background and all that stuff. And because they just had priorities and didn't fit into them. And, for the sandbox and stuff like that, we don't have a safe way to do that. And so all of it was like, when we have the CPU, when we have the memory, when we've come up with a safe way for you to do it, we will let you do it. But not before then. Not like, oh, just add it. I know how you can get this to work. Look, if I go to the jailbreak stores, I can get something that does this right now. That lets me put widgets on the lock screen. And it's like, Apple wanted to come up with everything had to be in place. And the final thing that had to be in place is we have to have a safe way for you to do things. So you're not compromising the stability of the system. So you're not allowing malware. So you're not doing all,
Or your own privacy as well. Because they talked about how extensions, very briefly, they spoke about how extensions are going to be sandboxed. And this might be in the NDA session, so I should probably shut up. But suffice to say, they took not only security of the system, but also your information security very seriously. That's the safety.
Like all the things they prioritize for, you are safe using iOS in these ways, and we're not going going to let you do all the things that you guys all want to do until we have safe ways to do it within the current envelope of hardware. And then, of course, it's a lot of work for them to make those APIs. And this is the year. This is the year where they have crossed the threshold for all of these things. And there probably is a philosophical aspect of it as well. And if there's been so much shakeup at the high levels of Apple management that you can't discount that as one of the possible reasons. But you have to just look at it. Look at the way they're giving us all this stuff, and all of it is not the same way that the jailbreak stores gave it to us. It is an official supported API that works with their existing sandboxing and prioritization stuff on the Mac as well as on iOS.
Yeah. So as a way to transition from Mac to iOS, I wanted to briefly talk about, I forget what they called it, what their marketing term for it was, but when you can send traditional SMS messages via the Mac, but it's at your iPhone does the sending. You can actually even take voice calls.
I believe it's called Blue Phone Elite.
Yeah, like
8 years ago.
It is very much in the demo. You might be mistaken for thinking it's like, oh, I've been able to do that on Google Voice for years, but it's paired with your phone. No iPhone, none of this stuff works.
Right,
so, but it's the same type of like the third-party products that would basically say you've got a phone, but you want to do stuff that your phone could only do on your Mac screen, and it just connects the dots, and it looks really nice and it's very seamless, and it's something that was like, yeah, that should work that way. Why do I have to go and pick up the phone or do having the caller ID show up as a notification, having you be able to answer that call from your Mac? Like, it's using your phone, but they're all in the same house, even if it's another room. They're all connected on the same network. Why shouldn't this work? And Apple made it work.
Now, I hope it works well. And here again, I hope it doesn't rely on Bluetooth Low Energy. I presume in the case of phone calls, it certainly wouldn't. But nevertheless, I just think it's a really impressive. It's a really impressive way to leverage the platform and really do what you would hope and expect these things to do. And I'm really excited about that. So with that in mind, let's kind of shift gears to iOS. There's so much to talk about. I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah, I remember when I said that iOS 8 was going to be like the Mavericks of iOS, was just, not a lot out on the outside and, and some stuff on the inside, but this is way bigger than a Mavericks release. It's true that they didn't change the appearance that much, like very little visually has been changed, but the number of things they're changing in every other part of iOS is just huge.
Yeah, it's really surprising. There were a couple things that jumped out at me really quickly because they're things that have really bothered me over the years. They didn't talk a lot about it in the keynote, but it seems like for iMessages and SMSs and things like that, it seems like all media is ephemeral by default. If you look closely at the keynote, after like an image or after one of these audio clips that's, I believe, new, or after a video clip, after each of these it says keep.
Yeah.
And so the implication, I think they made a very quick mention of it, but the implication was if you don't hit the keep button in the next 3 days or whatever the number may be, then that's just going to go away. And I especially have lamented numerous times about how I had gigs upon gigs of, well, probably animated GIFs, but one way or the other, gigs upon gigs of photos in my Messages app on my phone that I didn't really need and I didn't really want. I wanted them to go away, and I wanted them to do that easily and quickly. And this seems like it's probably going to be the answer for that.
Yeah, I mean, they did so. I mean, and this leads very, very closely to the photos discussion, I think.
Yep, absolutely.
I mean, so to recap, basically they announced this a few new things around photos. That's basically like, it's basically what people wanted, which is like, photo stream as like a standalone thing is kind of going away as what it was before. You still have like the shared photo streams. That's more of a feature, but as a storage mechanism, PhotoStream has been massively upgraded, and now you just have all of your photos are just in iCloud. And they use your iCloud storage, which now has a couple of bigger, cheaper plans. And it's it's not, we're not talking about like revolutionary pricing. I mean, what was it like? It was 200 gigs for $4 a month, and
yeah, whatever it was. Like, I think it was
only like 20 gigs for $4, but there was cheap plans. I mean, it's much cheaper than it was, right? But but
it's still not like Google level pricing.
We don't have enough information yet to see what this is really going to be like. But they said the right things. When one of the things they said that I'm glad about was they said we keep your full res pictures, which is
videos.
Yeah, and videos, which is opposed to what Marco was saying in the past shows that like, if Apple needs to, they should just do a lower res stuff if they can't handle it or whatever. And Apple's basically saying, no, actually, we can handle it. And not only can we handle your full res pictures, we'll handle your video too, which seems crazy, but like, hey, go for it, right? And then the pricing, that it's like all that announcement means nothing unless they adjust the pricing. And they did adjust the pricing. Have they adjusted it enough? We'll see. But the previous pricing was crazy and punitive.
Well,
and
but
now,
I'm not in love with this pricing because was it 5 gigs for free? which I just think is
It's a little low.
That is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then I think it was 20 gigs. Is that what you're saying? 20 gigs was some
20 and 200.
Well, 20 gigs
they have
was like
plans up to a terabyte, but they didn't say how much those cost. But it's, I mean, either way, we're talking. It's not dirt cheap, but it's not that expensive. You're not paying like S3 rates for this.
Yeah, we would hope. What we would hope is that. Say you're starting off as an Apple customer now, and you're just becoming an adult and taking pictures or whatever. Like, we would hope that as you accumulate pictures, that Apple's pricing keeps pace and comes down. But for people with existing large collections, we're going to have to look at that and do the math and say, is this worthwhile for me to do this? And they didn't mention anything about iPhoto, and I have no idea what the fate of iPhoto is. And they showed this Photos app, which is like the iOS. Oh,
come on, you know what the fate of iPhoto
is. The iOS Photos app. Well, no, because the iOS Photos app doesn't do anything close. There's iPhoto on iOS too. You know what I mean? The Photos app is on iOS, and there's also iPhoto on iOS.
I think iPhoto is going with Dashboard.
I don't know.
Earlier, even.
You can't use them for the same thing. Like, the whole idea that, can you take your photo collection and just put it all up into the cloud and deal with your photos that way? I don't know what the answer to that is yet. I don't think that the keynote gave us enough information to know that.
Well, I think the implication is very clear. iPhoto has always had this problem where iPhoto was originally conceived in a world before the iPhone and sync, and it never had multi-device sync and everything else. And PhotoStream kind of like half-assed it in there, but it wasn't a very good solution, and certainly was very confusing. And then the iPhone comes out and the iPad comes out, and they have this Photos app, which is not iPhoto, distinctly not iPhoto, and it has its own way to do things and store things and manage things. And then they bring iPhoto to iOS, which is weird because they didn't replace Photos with it. They just brought this other photo management program, which iPhoto on iOS, in my opinion, has never been good. But maybe that's just me. But it certainly, I don't think, has gotten widespread adoption.
How could iPhoto be any good on iOS if all your photos are in the Photo app?
Exactly.
But it seems like what they've done is brought that same dichotomy to the Mac. And I don't understand why iPhoto can't be the same app it is today, but all the photo storage done the iCloud way.
Oh, I think the new Photos app on the Mac that they showed off that's coming out, was it next spring or this fall?
Yeah, they said it's not tied. They said next year, and so basically it means it's not tied to an OS release, and it's not it got pushed basically. It didn't make it into Yosemite, right? So
I'm pretty sure the implication there though is that the new Photos app for Mac that's coming next year is the replacement for iPhoto.
But what they showed was not. What they showed was the iOS Photos app inside a window with a dinky little toolbar. It doesn't come close to like doing keywords and maps and slideshows and all the stuff that.
I bet it will, because Photos app on iOS already has much. It doesn't have the management stuff, but it has like the maps and the albums and it's getting a lot of that already. I think the implication of where they're going is very clear. Like, iPhoto's going away. This is the replacement. We're just not done with it yet.
I mean, like the good thing is that from the photos in the cloud, like it's what we're talking about with messages. What they're basically saying is some of these photos will be on your local device, but you have access to more photos. Like, I mean, Everpix did it. You didn't have every single photo in your photo library on your phone just because you uploaded to Everpix, but you could scroll through all of them and you can show any one of them. And Apple is doing that now. Apple's saying, yeah, we're going to do that too. All your photos can't be on your iOS device. We'll store all your photos, but you can get to all of them from your iOS device, and you can get to them all from your Mac sometime next year. And that's what we're looking for. Unified photos, protected in the cloud, hopefully locally cached on your Mac when the hard drive is big enough, and some of them on your phone.
And if the Mac version is good enough and able to and willing to also import SLR pictures and pictures from standalone cameras, then that will be amazing. So I don't know. I think it's very, very clear where they're going. I think
I agree.
Aperture. It's. What do you think? Do you think Aperture continues to? I think it probably does, but
yeah, but the Pro stuff will lag. But like the whole idea, it's what we want. We want to have local, fast access to our photos, but we want not to worry that if our computers die, that we lose our photos. So we want Apple to store them and back them in the cloud, have it be synced everywhere, but have fast local copies. And Aperture, as the Pro app, may be like, well, the Pro people don't want their stuff in the cloud, and it's too big anyway, so they'll just have it on local hard drives. But like, you can't. This is going to come. Like the whole idea of sort of a transparent storage hierarchy, where the canonical version is stored in a data center somewhere really safely for you, hopefully not on HFS Plus, and all of your and all of your local versions are like just caches of it, and everything is synchronized and everything is fast because of local caching, and it's all seamless. That's where all storage is going. And for giant bins of data that we have, and our giant bins are basically photos and video for regular people, that's what we want, a storage hierarchy that ends in the cloud and that is transparent to us.
Yeah, and I feel like the the Photos setup that Apple's building, I'm still grumbly about the price. But if that's the most of my complaints, then we're still doing a pretty good job. And I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to trying it. The only thing I wonder, though, is how are we going to get the years upon years upon years of photos that we've already taken into...
That's what I was saying. Like if they came up with a new version of iPhoto, or if the Photos app is the new version of iPhoto, that we would import them, or it would say, okay, now we're just going to transparently make your iPhoto library in the cloud, and it would take forever, but there's a path to that. Did they talk about in the keynote they had CloudKit for like a slide and a half, right?
Like Gruber said, they gave CloudKit in like 90 seconds. But it was quick.
Did they mention what you get with CloudKit in terms of storage limits, or was that only in the State of the Union?
No, they did say...
They went over it very quickly. They said that it was free with limits, and you get like... Well, there was we can't. The limits were not stated, so we can't tell you what the limits are.
I thought they were.
No, there's in a document that it was.
But anyway, they said free with limits, and those limits are pretty darn high. We could say from the sessions we've seen, so high that I don't understand how Apple is able to to provide the CloudKit free with limits to the. It looks too good to be true.
To correct, they did give the limits in the presentation for like what the global you store whatever petabytes of data. They did say that, but they didn't tell you what you get per user.
Right. Well, yeah. So that's interesting though, because so if they gave the petabyte stat, they're saying if you make an iOS app and say your iOS app is going to store something big like audio files or video, or who knows what it's going to store, whatever. For the limits are like with the free thing before you start paying any money is you can store a petabyte of data for all users of your app combined. And we don't know what anything is per user or whatever, but why is it that if you develop an app, you get to store a petabyte for free?
Well,
where if you want to store your photos on iCloud, you have to pay 99 cents to get like 20 gigs and $3 to get 200 gigs.
Well, the per user, what you get per user, I don't think we're allowed to say, but it's pretty small. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that it's you'd have to have a lot of users of your app.
I guess that's their way.
These limits.
But still, and the bottom line is, say you make some viral app like Candy Crush and you store a bunch of crappy content for everybody, and you run into that petabyte. Apple is storing a petabyte of your data for free.
Amazon and Microsoft are storing a petabyte of your data.
It just seems like that the pricing is still a little bit out of whack. Like I would rather see Apple try to I don't know how to rationalize that. I don't know how to rationalize their willingness to do this stuff for free for an app developer while charging individual users so much more to get. I like the new pricing better than the old pricing, but I still can't decide whether it's something that fits with their own offering for app developers or fits with what people are going to be willing to pay for it. Because that's the whole thing with this. If someone gets a Mac and you're like, oh, you should totally sign up for iCloud and do this monthly bill, that's going to be a hard sell on people. And same thing with when you get your iOS device and you run up to the free storage limits, and you got to say, oh well, you have to pay money now, and it just seems a little bit like a bait and switch. I would rather have it be more upfront and have some assurance that this is something that regular people are going to do, that we're all going to take advantage of, and that it's a price that we're willing to deal with instead of having it creep up on you.
Yeah. And some real-time follow-up quickly. The limits per user are made public in a public document, which we'll put in the show notes if I remember to, which I probably won't because I'm very hungry and tired. It is 100 megs per user for assets, 1 meg for database, and then there's some transfer limits. But yeah, so
those limits are tiny. But
yeah,
so Apple's
like you couldn't build Instagram with that. Like that would probably hit that.
You'd have to have like a wildly popular app that just saves like high scores or some crap like that. But still, again, Apple's willingness is like, go ahead, try to make an app that has 300 million users. Then we will end up storing a petabyte of data for you. But somehow that's okay with them.
And I think. This, and there are limits with CloudKit. As far as we know, we haven't learned much about it yet, and I haven't looked at the docs much because I haven't had time yet. But as far as we can tell, this is not going to let you build a website.
No. You can't even run anything server side, as far as we know.
Yeah, it seems like it's all local. It's all client side code that tells the servers roughly what to do. But it's like fetches and stuff. It's like it doesn't seem like there's a way. For instance, like for me with Overcast or like underscore with Feed Wrangler, like it doesn't seem like there's a way to like run persistent crawlers on their servers and have them notify you when new stuff comes in like that.
Well, they do have the notification thing.
But like a client has to pick up that data or generate that data to tell other clients that it's available. It like your server can't do it.
Right, exactly.
So you can't have a web version. You can't have obviously Windows or Android version. So like it's still a very limited system. It's not going to replace servers for a lot of people, and it's not like you're not going to build the next Instagram with this because the next Instagram is going to have to work on Android at some point.
But it is an improvement. Like you can take it as a different take on what core data to iCloud iCloud core
definitely.
data does. Because now they have a schemaless database with queries that they'll run for you to notify your app, and that's the bucket you put your thing in. But it's a different take on iCloud core data in that it's not something that started local and went cloud. It started cloud the whole time. It's always in the cloud. It's very similar things can be done with both of them. I don't know what the interface is to programming. Like, does it make it look like you just have a bunch of objects and they magically persist? But again, they say all the right words, and it seems like this will be a more reliable, easier to understand, easier to debug way to do some of the same tasks that people are currently doing with core data and iCloud.
Exactly. Our final sponsor this week is our friends. They're back, finally. Our friends at Squarespace.
Hooray!
Go to squarespace.com/ATP. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy, Mike Hurley, to create your own professional website, portfolio, and online store. For a free trial and 10% off, go to squarespace.com/ATP and enter offer code ATP at checkout. A better web starts with your website. So Squarespace is simple and easy. They have a beautiful design. They have many designs for you to choose. You can customize them if you want. You can leave them as is. You can inject HTML, JavaScript, whatever you want, or you can leave them and use their nice graphical friendly tools. You can have mobile designs that match your site. So your device, you can have responsive mobile design so your site looks good on every device every time. They have 24/7 support. They have live chat, email, located in New York City and Dublin. Now, there is a Dublin, Ohio. That's a very boring place. I've been there a lot. I'm pretty sure they mean the one in Ireland for this one, so that's pretty cool. It's way better. The one in Ireland, trust me. Sorry, Dublin, Ohio. You just can't do it. Sorry. Plans start at just $8 a month. That includes a free domain name if you sign up for a whole year up front. So go to squarespace.com/ATP. You can even, I forgot to mention, you can even build your online store. They have Squarespace Commerce. Really, really great. They have start a free trial with no credit card required. Start building your website today. When you decide to sign up, don't forget to use our offer code ATP to get 10% off your first purchase and to show your support for our show. Thank you very much to Squarespace for sponsoring our show once again.
So I have a couple questions about iOS, and then I think we should talk about Swift before we wrap. Firstly, do we know? We don't really know anything about identification, authentication, that sort of thing with regard to CloudKit, right? Because it would be really neat, even if I didn't use barely anything else with relation to iCloud. Like, say I'm Marco and I'm writing Overcast. It would ostensibly be really great to get the accounts system out of CloudKit, but do everything else myself. Just get a token from CloudKit to identify who this person is, and then everything else I take care of on my own. But we don't know that, right?
Couldn't you do that already if you wanted to through iCloud? I guess you just sort of make yourself a little vestigial iCloud document container that you never use.
I guess you could.
Well, what you could do is you could just generate like a random key or generate a random ID and store it in key value storage, and then you could read that later. But then when you base your authentication on iCloud, you get this big benefit of they're already logged into this thing. But it also comes with a lot of weird little downsides and complexities that a lot of people don't
If they sign out of iCloud, then you have to put their stuff off to the side in case they sign back into it to restore it for them. And
right. So there's a number of weirdnesses with that. Now the good thing is something else that's totally unrelated to this that they announced is the family sharing, which
thank God.
Yeah, I think so. Family sharing, you can have up to like 6 people. If you all have the same credit card, which is a good limitation to prevent weird fraud issues, you can have up to 6 people have basically pooled purchases for all the iTunes media as well as apps and in-app purchases, which is awesome because I think this will dramatically cut down on people who need to keep signing in and out of different Apple IDs because they have one ID that purchases everything that they share with their wife or their kids or whatever, and I think this is going to really help that anyway. So that's besides the point. So if you use iCloud as your authentication mechanism, you're tied to that. So and sometimes that isn't what users expect. So like if someone's signing into different iCloud accounts, and they launch your podcast app, and all of a sudden everything's gone because they sign into a different account to download a movie, and they forgot about that, and they launch your app, and your app has no idea who they are or where all the stuff is. Because
Apple's always been pretty good about giving you a different Apple ID for each of the individual apps. Like I've learned that setting up all devices for my kids, and I'm surprised at the number of places I have to go hunt down my Apple ID and remove them and put in a different Apple ID. Oh, I forgot that iMessage is still signed in as me. Oh, I forgot that the App Store was signed in as me. And they're pretty good about spreading it around. But like the big thing with the families is, I mean, they haven't really finished this job. They've just started this job. But it's acknowledging, I tweeted during the thing, acknowledging the existence of families. It's acknowledging how regular people use their products, that we exist in families, that kids might have their own devices, that they get the hand-me-down devices, that we don't want to buy the app multiple times. One of the other acknowledgments is that in general, the family has a family collection of photos, whereas individual kids might have individual collection of photos. But like, you don't want to, I got to go on my wife's computer because that's the photo computer. That's where all of our photos are. Like, they haven't gotten that point yet, so the no iLife is an island type of thing. But at the very least, they acknowledge your kids want to buy stuff. You don't want them to be able to sign in. So now you get a notification on your device that says, so-and-so wants to buy something, approve or reject. Like, that's what happens in real life anyway. And so now they're building into the OS, electronically, which is, they must all have iOS devices in their family, and it's taken this long to create a product that acknowledges how everybody knows everybody's using these products to begin with. That's
yep.
right.
Yeah, and I mean, this is just one of those things. Like the amount of crap they had unveiled today. It's like I said 2 weeks ago or last week that Apple lacked server-side hustle, and
that's a good point. Yeah,
and I think that's probably still the case in general with their online services. But I think this shows where all the hustle's been spent.
I think you picked an unfortunate word, because all I can think about is the kid who's like running for with a football or trying to go somewhere for a pass and doesn't get there in time, but the coach says, all right, good hustle. But it's like, you didn't make it there, but good hustle, son. And sure, yeah, they are showing hustle. I just don't know if they're the kid who wasn't fast enough and the coach just wants to sound encouraging anyway. We want to see like them catch the touchdown pass, not just to say good hustle, son.
Well, it seems like server and service side stuff, they are still keeping pretty limited, but I think they're doing like what we see today, or what we saw today, is that they're doing a lot more. Like the whole iCloud Dropbox copy thing. I did not expect that at all. Like that was like a line I didn't think they would ever cross with iCloud, and it solves a lot of problems that we've talked about with iCloud. Things like the file siloing and document siloing, and how the heck you address that.
When they first showed it, the silos are right there. Look, there's a folder called Keynote. That's the Keynote silo. And look, there's a folder called Pages. That's the Pages silo. I mean, the unification of those apps across, like the unification of iWork, makes them be able to have those silos in both places, because otherwise it wouldn't make any sense. You'd have like iOS Pages versus whatever, right?
Yeah.
The silos are still all there. The whole idea is that if you just want to be siloed like you are now, it's fine. But there's this other way you can look at things. And the question is, like, when I look at iCloud and it says Keynote and Pages or whatever, can I make my own folders alongside them? Yes, you can. And like, well, whose sandbox is that in? Is that in the Keynote sandbox? Is that in the whatever sandbox? And the answer is no, it's not in the Keynote document container is over there. Pages document container over there. But within Pages on iOS, you can hit the little whatever that brings up the iOS equivalent of the Open Save dialog box and go to someplace else that's not in your document container and get a document, like the folder that you made called, Garage Sale. That's going to be your project for all your crap for the garage sale.
Yeah.
And so, it's like I say, having their cake and eat it too. If you want to work the old way, it still works 100% the old way. If you want to work the new way, you can just pretend that old way didn't exist and just make a bunch of folders at the top level and never look in your document container. And it's all from like the little extension of the sandbox reaching out into this other world and allowing you to access these files.
Yeah, I should point out, I do not like the look of that quote-unquote open save dialog. I think it looks like
They never showed list view, so I don't know what it looks like list view.
Fair point.
Yeah, it might be reasonable.
Yeah. The other thing I want to talk about really quickly about iOS, and maybe you guys have some other stuff too, but the leaving and muting of group messages is wonderful.
Again, an acknowledgement of how people, like, who... Is there a larger concentration of people who use iPhones and iOS devices than Apple employees? They must all know what it's like to be, to have the friends with the green bubbles you can't talk about, to not be able to leave the group chats, to have, again, with the messages with the keep button, like acknowledging that you had the wrong defaults. Like, you thought the default would be keep everything and let people individually delete, and it turns out the right default is delete everything and let people individually keep.
Yeah, and I'm just so excited. I'm excited that you can leave a conversation, although it was never made clear to me that this is SMS and iMessage. Like, maybe
that's
just
I think still
iMessage.
Unclear.
Right.
Yeah.
But not only can you leave a conversation, but you can also mute a conversation. I think they called it a different term, but in effect, you don't get buzzes in your pocket and so on. But nevertheless, you'll still receive the messages.
It should be SMS too, because they'll just ignore. Like, it's a software thing. Like, you'd still be getting the SMSs. They're just not. You could do it all client side essentially.
Oh, I completely agree with you, but it was never made clear, and so I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch. But I'm extremely, extremely excited about that because I get on these group messages and it's like one or two people I know and then like 10 random phone numbers. And of course, nobody's courteous enough to just reply to the author individually, and then I'm on these damn conversations that last 2 days, often at odd hours in the morning, and it's just the most frustrating thing in the world. So I'm really excited about that. Anything else about iOS that you guys have?
I think they did everything that we ever wanted for iOS, except for that we talked about previously in the podcast, except for letting you pick a different default app. As they did third-party keyboards, they did widgets on the lock screen. They didn't do widgets on the home screen, but they did widgets on the lock screen. Being able to share documents between applications for inter-app communication. They just didn't do, hey, I want to use Chrome as my default browser. I don't want to use Apple Mail as my default mail.
Right. And that was, I mean, wishing for that has always been a stretch. They might still do it someday, but that's...
I think that is exactly, I think third-party keyboards is even more of a stretch. Like that is exactly in the ballpark of the things they did. Like they did things that are as radical as letting you change your default app, I feel like.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and, the entire extension system is just like shockingly robust and just changes everything. I mean, it's going to take us. I was talking to Underscore about this earlier. I think, all of a sudden now, for all of iOS's history, for a lot of listeners of this show, certainly for me, people who have been working on iOS apps all this time so far, there's been these entire categories of apps that were impossible or impractical to make on iOS. Entire capabilities that we lacked, that we couldn't do well. Stupid hacks, like for Instapaper, having to make the stupid bookmarklet. Stupid hacks like that. Hell, the entire URL scheme thing that we've been hacking around now. Like, so many of these things are totally obsolete now with the new extension system. And so not only do we have all these existing things we've been doing that will now be able to be a lot better and a lot more robust, but there's entire classes of apps that have never been possible to make before that are now possible, or entire classes of activities that before you could do, but it was so clunky it would never really take off and would never really be that much of a good product. Now those things can be native and can be good. And it's going to take, I would say, at least a year for many of us who have been doing this for a while to forget that we can't do these things. It's like, because now we have so many new capabilities that all came at once, in addition to this whole new language that we have to learn, which we'll get to. Like, we have all these new things that we can now do. Like, it's going to take a while for us to finally internalize these things so that we can start realizing, wait a minute, we can do X, Y, and Z. Like, oh man, this would be a great idea for an app, or this would be a great enhancement to our existing app. Now we can do this. Like, it's that list is so long of what you can now do that this is just it's going to be ridiculously good for us, I think, long term, and it's going to take a while to see the full effects.
And they did the obvious implementation. Like, I remember when we were talking about, what if they let you do an activity sheet thing where you can, have your thing like add to Instapaper, add to Pinterest, and like, well, if they do that, then every dog and his brother is going to have a little stupid icon in the thing, so they'll need some kind of preference for you to turn them on and off. And it, like, with the simplicity of iOS, Notification Center and it was the first thing that showed, like, they're not afraid to give you a wall of checkboxes or, switches in iOS. And so they do that. Like, the obvious implementation is you register that you're able to hand URLs, you let the user have a gigantic wall of on-off switches to tell which ones they want to see. Done and done. Like, that's what we were all saying. Like, well, you can't do that. And it's just like, no, they can. And the great thing about Apple doing it is, like, the ecosystem they're creating now is not just like one app vendor manages to do something within there, like, oh, my 3 apps cooperate. All the apps are going to be able to cooperate. So you are going to be able to reap the benefits or latch onto and enhance some other app, because if you can work on the same data and integrate with each other, you don't need third parties to cooperate with each other outside the realm of the store. App developers that never knew each other the user can now use their apps to work together on a single thing. And that's what it's been like on the Mac always, but now it'll be like that on iOS.
Yeah, it's really impressive. And I feel like we're seeing a whole new, I don't know if progressive is the right word, but a whole new progressive Apple that's willing to do the things that we never thought they would be willing to do. And I'm really excited about it. Now, granted, I'm always amped up and really excited and jazzed after the keynote and so on. But I feel more excited today about not only what they've announced, but what we can imagine in the future, because all of these impenetrable doors that have been triple locked and cement sealed and welded shut, a few of them were blown open today. And so if they're willing to do a new keyboard, gosh knows what they're going to be willing to do in the future. And so I'm really, really excited. I mean, it's almost like they came out with a new, they did come out with a new language today, didn't they, John?
So, but I think a lot of this is, decision changes at Apple, possibly related to leadership changes. But I think, what John said earlier is very correct, where it's like, they were able to do all this stuff because of both hardware advances with the ability to have, more things in memory at once, and also all the security features that they've added, that they've, like,
they had to build the infrastructure to enable these features.
Like, many of these features, nowadays, like, now that they're doing them and the way they're doing them now, many of them have no downside. Like, there's no cost to doing this now. There was always a good reason not to before, but once you have the infrastructure and once the hardware is caught up enough to allow a lot of these things, they didn't give us home screen widgets on Springboard because the home screen's always showing. But when you pull down the notification center, like, now they can intelligently refresh those only when you pull down notification center. A lot of people never pull down a notification center, so they never have to update them. Like, there's all sorts of optimizations they can do, all sorts of just restrictions and limits on where they're choosing to do these things and how they're choosing to do these things, make them possible and make them come with low or no cost overall to the experience.
That's part of Apple's secrecy thing, is that, like, it's obvious now in hindsight how they were laying the groundwork for all of these things. They're laying the groundwork by allowing technology to advance, by the hardware getting better, but also building all the APIs, enhancing them so that they're able to deliver this. And you could say, oh, this was the grand plan all along. 3 years ago when we were complaining about this stuff, it's just Apple couldn't say it was a secret they were doing this. And we don't know whether that's the case or not. But it seems like from the outside that, like, their priorities haven't changed. Every time we've gotten a new feature, it's been like, now within the bounds of the priorities we set out for iOS in terms of safety and responsiveness, we are now able to deliver this feature that you've wanted a long time. And it's like, aha, Apple has changed direction. They've simply stuck to their priorities and waited, not just waited in terms of the hardware, but also said, if we're going to ever do this, let's figure out the steps we would have to take. And over a series of iOS releases, they lay the groundwork slowly, and then now finally they can come out. And in iOS 8, it seems like a whole bunch of those things came to a head at the same time. Like, finally they had the infrastructure to do all of these things, and they did all of them.
Yeah, it's been really impressive. So we should talk about this new language. John, what do you think?
I don't know. I feel vindicated in some ways, because if you think about, like, the Copeland 2010 thing, and 2010 came and went and nothing happened.
When was revisited? Was that 2012?
2010 was when I revisited it. Right?
Oh, right. Because you had written the original in, like, 2003 or something like that.
And all
2003?
2005.
Whatever, sorry.
Or 2005, as you say.
Where's Jason when we need him?
Yeah.
How many numbers are?
Anyway,
John is right.
The whole debate, amongst us on the outside of Apple is about, like, why do you think they need a new language and runtime? Why can't they just use Objective-C and continue to enhance it? And what Apple came out with was not a continued enhancement of Objective-C. It was a new language, unequivocally a new language. It looks different. It's got a different name. The only thing they haven't changed is the API. It seems to be under the cover. It's the same API, but the way you use it is different because there are so many language features that essentially convert to a big whole mess of Objective-C code. So they're sort of getting the new API without getting a new API, which is very clever. Like, they're not saying, oh, this language is so different, we are going to need all new APIs, all new function names with all new arguments or whatever. Instead, they said, here's this compact way to say something that it essentially is this big, long block of, not block, but, this big wad of Objective-C code. You don't have to write that big wad anymore. All of that intent is expressed in this thing. And it's not a new API. And that, I think, is very clever. Now, I haven't had time to look at the language itself. It looks a lot like a language written by people who like C and C++ and Objective-C. I'm not necessarily one of those people, but for people, it should be familiar to them. I heard Joel Spolsky say on Twitter that it looked a lot like Go, and his comparison was C# is to Java as Swift is to Go. And again, not having looked at it very long, that seems vaguely apt. But the bottom line is they have a new language. They're committing to it going forward. It builds on everything they've done before. It builds on LLVM. It builds on their whole compiler infrastructure. It builds on their IDE.
On Arc.
Yeah, on Arc. It is the compromise you talked about, Objective-C without the C, which was actually on a slide. The actual phrase, it said Objective-C without I couldn't even freaking believe it. I was trying to remember who originally came up with that phrase on the web. It wasn't me. But it was in the discussion of like, why don't they just keep shaving the edges off Objective-C? Like, it's Objective-C, but you won't need pointers. Like, Swift doesn't have the friggin' stars. Like, it's not, you can mix it with Objective-C code. There are pointers behind the scene, but you don't have access. You have to dereference them and start doing random crap. And this is their compromise. Unsafe code mixed with safe code. But the safe code is so very clearly safe. And it's super fast because under the covers, it's compiling down to, LLVM intermediary code, which is optimized. I mean, it's the same. It's calling the same APIs. Someone was asking when they get the RC4 benchmark, like, look how much faster Swift is at RC4 benchmark than Objective-C. How could Objective-C be so slow? And doing this RC4 benchmark, what is it about Swift that makes it faster? I mean, people would say, okay, so fine, so Swift is just as fast. Good. How can Swift be faster? I don't know the answer to that, having just come out of the keynote, but my guess is that Swift lets you express what you want to do in a way that doesn't have all the baggage of C and C++ and all those other languages, because they have to be so cautious about, well, I could do this optimization, but what if the thing that I call actually writes to this memory address?
Exactly.
And Swift can say, I can tell you that's not going to happen because they have no way to get at that. There's no way for them to dereference something and go scribble over the section of it. Like, trust me, it's going to be the same. Oh, what was that? Anyway,
we're back.
Trust me, it's going to be safe to do this optimization because the program has expressed its intent, and we don't have to worry about all these cases in a C and C++ compiler that are unsafe, that the compiler cannot make strong guarantees about. It has to do with the cautious thing. Now, I don't know if that's why the RC4 benchmark is faster, but that's what I've been talking about all these years about. What can you do with a new language? It's not just syntactic sugar. It's because you can allow the programmer to express their intent without having all these details of the implementation of a memory unsafe language that the runtime and compiling system has to worry about.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. The performance gains don't make a lot of sense otherwise, but it has to be about that, about optimizations and all the assumptions that the compiler can make, and the optimizing compilers are so advanced these days, and the more information you can give them about what they need to do and what they don't need to do, the better optimized code they can generate. It makes a huge difference.
I think there was a big presentation by someone on the LLVM thing. It might have been Chris Latta or somebody else that was going through like undefined behavior according to the C specification. C specification says if you do X or Y, it's undefined behavior. And there are so many cases that it comes up, and it ties. I mean, they're raking LLVM and the optimizer and the code generator. It ties their hands. It's like, boy, we would love to do this optimization, but according to the C spec, it's not safe for us to do it. And so they would just be sitting there just waiting to unleash these optimizations. And with Swift, they can define a language that is not impaired in that way, that it doesn't have all these edge cases, and say, now finally we can pull all those optimizations. It is safe to do this, guaranteed. Do it and make your code faster.
Yeah, the other thing that was really impressive about Swift, which comes back to what you were saying earlier about constant priorities, is the protections around doing something stupid. A great example being overrunning an array. So if this array is 20 items and you ask for item 25, it's going to catch that and not let you do something either stupid or dangerous. And it's going to probably fail dramatically, but that's a much better approach than just letting you run amok in memory that really doesn't belong to you. And that's just one example of many different protections they've made in order to prevent something like the Heartbleed bug.
Yeah, they didn't want to give up anything. So like compile time, static analysis, strong typing, so we can catch if there was an array out of bounds error, they would catch that at compile time if they could, if it wasn't a runtime value being put in there, because they didn't give up any of the typing stuff. Like I saw this tweet that I didn't read it myself, but someone was saying in the Swift book that Apple put out on the iBook store, which you can go get for free right now, it was saying Swift is designed to be a language that you can use to write everything from operating systems up to applications, like a single language that it's not like, oh, well, you just use this to make your fancy GUI apps. When you write the OS, you have to do it in C. It seems like Apple is saying, we can be Swift from top to bottom. Everything we make, all the software we make as Apple, from the operating system itself all the way up to all of our GUI applications, in theory, could be written in Swift because that's how it's designed. It's designed to be as efficient as the low-level languages, but even more pleasant to use than Objective-C was. And that is an ambitious goal, and I applaud them for it. I'm not sure they've achieved it yet because I haven't read enough about the language, but, I mean, what more can you ask? That new language, from top to bottom, fully committed.
Yeah, I mean, it always seemed like, this is one of the reasons why I don't learn new languages very often, much to your chagrin. It always seems like a waste of technology and resources and effort to have these languages that have, great feature X, Y, and Z, and then but it doesn't run on Linux, or you can't use it to build GUIs, or like there's all these limitations. That's like it's not really the fault of the language; it's more of a library issue usually, or an implementation or VM issue or something like And it just seems like a waste to have. To become an expert in a language that you then can't use for X, Y, or Z. Like, at least from my point of view of not wanting to learn new languages very often. But this is the kind of thing. Like looking at this, obviously, yes, I'm going to learn this because I think every Objective-C programmer today should start learning Swift as soon as they can, because it's
absolutely.
It's not like Objective-C is going to be deprecated or go away in a year. It's look at how long Apple has supported the old C APIs, all the core foundation stuff, C++ compilation and everything. Like this is going to be here Objective-C is going to be around for a while.
I mean, but they map to each other. That's the freaky thing about it. Like they showed the thing where they said you can look at an Objective-C header and we will translate it mechanically to the Swift header, because like they didn't change the API. Underneath it is like you can write the equivalent Objective-C code. The Objective-C code that would be unsafe because you could dereference anything and do crazy stuff. The Swift code is safe because what you write doesn't include any of that stuff, and that's fairly genius. Like saying that we're gonna make. I mean, in that respect, it's like Go. This is a low-level language with a high-level syntax.
Right, and the other interesting thing to me was that as much as we all bemoan Xcode, they spent enough time to make the Xcode tooling good. Just like you said, when you look at documentation, it will mechanically translate from Objective-C to Swift. Additionally, they have, Playground? Is that right? Which is basically like not quite a command line like interactive interpreter. It's better than that, and it's GUI based. And so they were showing demos of rewinding and playing animations and doing things that I would love to be able to do.
Yeah.
And this is just Xcode's Swift tooling. There's a bunch of other tooling, I think most of which is NDA'd, that's also extremely impressive. And they didn't just throw this language out there and say, hey, you're probably going to need to learn this, and we're not really going to help you. Just there's some documentation, go figure it out. There's the iBook that John mentioned. There's this Playground thing within Xcode. There's a whole bunch of documentation on their website. I mean, they've taken this seriously. And the rumblings I've heard from a few friends is that not everyone at Apple knew about this, but those that did have been working on it for a long time. And I think that's pretty apparent pretty quickly.
Yeah, and all the more impressive that it was kept secret all this time.
Absolutely. I mean, there were people, from what I've gathered, there were people at Apple that had no freaking clue this was about to happen, which to me is just mind-boggling.
I mean, that's the genius of the transparency. They didn't need to know, because it's not as if, once you saw them translate that header file, it's like they could translate your Objective-C source to Swift mechanically, perhaps, if they wanted to. I mean, probably not, because you have the C parts that they wouldn't be able to.
Right,
it's.
I bet they could do a lot of it.
So the rest of the organization doesn't need to know, because under it's all binary compatible, and that's in the State of the Union thing, which someone just tweeted that you could stream the State of the Union without any kind of password, so that it must be public. They mention that.
They said it was going to be binary compatible.
Oh yeah, but not necessarily source compatible, because what they're saying is we don't know whether we even have the syntax of this thing nailed down, even though we've been developing it for who knows how long internally. They're reserving the right to change their mind about the syntax before the release of any of the OSs that are built on it during the dev period. And of course, they'll go on, Swift 1.0, Swift 2.0, like they've done with Objective-C, that extended it like crazy. But Swift is designed, they were saying it was defined in terms of itself, which any Perl 6 fans out there, the 5 of you, hi guys, will know. Perl 6 was also defined in terms of itself. The language spec was written. The language itself was written in Perl 6. It doesn't have the mutable syntax of Perl 6, but that whole philosophy that Swift is sort of designed to be self-hosting, and that these things that we think that are intrinsic to the language, like arrays and collections or whatever, are actually not, but rather are it's library based. They're part of the libraries that build on it. So it's a modern construct of how to build a language. Don't just define a syntax and say this is the language forevermore, and then have different versions of it. But rather, design a language like LLVM. LLVM is a compiler system made as a series of libraries. Swift, made by the same people, surprise, is a language made as a series of libraries, and the libraries will change and be added to over time. And the core language itself is very, very small and tight.
Yeah, and this was also a very wise way to do it, in that they didn't replace the frameworks. They didn't,
they couldn't. It's too much work.
Right, and that's the thing. And that's we were always kind of worried. They sure do seem to be adding a lot of frameworks.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a big job to ever convert this to a new language, and instead they just designed a language that didn't need that conversion, and that's going to help us too. Like, it's not going to take very long for us to learn Swift because we'll learn the syntax in a weekend, and we'll get the bits and pieces like the fringes over time, but we already know the entire library. Like, the libraries have not changed. We know we know all the frameworks already, and that's a huge win.
I mean, there's still the win that they're not getting, which is like using some of these APIs from Swift may seem silly. Like, in other words, if these APIs were designed in a world with Swift, would these APIs look the way they do? I mean, even stuff like, I don't know how they're going to handle like error parameters, with write back error parameters, stuff like that. Like, I'm sure there's massaging to be done there, so they're not like. It's the right compromise for them, but it is still a compromise in that if you were to design a new API in a world where Swift was the beginning instead of the end point of language evolution, your API would look different. But that's just not an option for them. And so this compromise, like Arc kind of, is the right compromise for Apple this time. I'm just happy that I'm not going to say that happy they saw the light, because I'm not like convincing anybody of anything, but like, I mean, I'm just happy that it happened because I thought it needed to happen, and I'm excited that it did. And assuming this process has been going on for years, this means I've been having conversations with people from Apple who knew that Swift was happening and could not tell me. And we would talk about, and I can just imagine what they must have been thinking as I'm talking to them and saying, "But look at what you could do with a whole new language instead of just extending Objective-C." And they would. Yeah, well, they knew.
Amazing.
They did it,
and at some point they're going to start making APIs that only work in Swift. There's so many APIs in previous transitions, like going from Carbon to Cocoa,
block-based APIs, for example.
Exactly.
They don't work without blocks,
right? And there are certain things like that where they're just not going to certain APIs. They're probably just not going to make Objective-C versions anymore. But the amazing thing about these tools and the way they've built this thing is that you can opt into Swift. It's just like Arc. You can opt in per compilation unit, which is per source file. And so you can have an app, I don't have to convert my entire app to Swift to use any of it. I can convert one file. I can just start writing new modules in Swift and eventually, port the whole application slowly over time as I update things. There's so many. The way they're doing this is so immensely practical for the environment that we're actually in today.
And now think of hindsight. Remember how gross the block syntax looks and looked with the caret and all that crazy stuff? And remember the dot syntax? It was like, I don't know about the dot and the regular thing. Some people stuck with a square bracket. In hindsight, you're like, don't worry about the ugly block syntax, guys. In Swift, it'll just be curly braces. Don't worry about the stupid dot syntax, guys. In Swift, it'll all be dots. If you look backwards at the Objective-C enhancements, and some of them are awkward and weird or whatever, all of them are just laying the groundwork to get Swift up to speed. And that's what makes me think Swift must have been a multi-year long process. And it would be poetic if I think back to did this project start in 2010?
That actually, based on some things we're hearing, it sounds like that might be around when it started. That's certainly in the ballpark.
Yeah.
And you think about how long this kind of effort takes anyway. It would have to have been at least, I'm sure they didn't start this in 2013, 2012. Probably 10, 11 ish. But this is. I'm so happy with how they're doing this. It's
extremely pragmatic.
Yes,
really
exactly. It really is, and it's a way to use their strengths. Apple's really good at recognizing when they have something good and being able to leverage their strengths in new creative ways. Like the dev tools team especially is just so good. I mean, the only thing I'm upset about here, besides that I have to learn something new, which I guess is probably a good thing. The only thing I'm upset about is I finally figured out block syntax.
Oh, yeah, I know.
I finally stopped having to go to our effing block syntax friend site. I finally stopped having to go there last month. I finally got it. I can write block as method parameters. I can write it as variables. I finally figured out block syntax reliably this month, and now it's all.
Don't feel bad, Marco. I know how to do Perl 4 formats. No one knows what that is in this room, but the 5 people out there who knew the Perl 6 stuff understand that, and that information became useless as well.
Yeah, so today your knowledge of blocks, the syntax of blocks went out the window. Marco is wearing the ATP shirt, and now all the code on the back is basically deprecated.
Yeah.
So
why didn't you write that in Swift?
Yeah, what's wrong with you? But no, it's been an extremely exciting day. I can't wait to learn more about it because just like John was saying, we've had no time today to look at this. iOS. And so at a glance, this all looks really compelling. And I presume that as we look deeper and deeper, it's going to look more and more compelling, but you never know. But I'm so excited to see what the next 4 days bring and see what we're going to learn about all of this. I mean, I noticed that in the sessions, there's like beginner level Swift, advanced level Swift, or intermediary and advanced, like all this week. And maybe that's under NDA, and if so, my bad. But suffice to say, they're doing multi-tier Swift sessions all in the span of a week. So I don't know who they think is going to intermediate level in the span of like 24 hours.
No, but I think it's like if you've never seen, like if you're a new developer, period, like they're going to go through the basics. Whereas if you have experience with 7 languages, I think you could jump right into the advanced Swift thing and they'll be like, oh, I understand. Like,
right.
You know, if you don't know what closures are, them just showing you that in the advanced thing, like, wait, I don't even know what it is you're talking about, let alone how it behaves. And, you know, in terms of like again, with all the Swift code, I didn't say any double underscore weaks or strongs or, you know, like what is the scope of the variables? How are they retaining the Swift? It's like, you don't need to worry about that anymore. I'm hoping you don't need to. I haven't looked deep enough.
Because it does use the ARC model underneath. So like things like weak references.
Right, but do you need to annotate?
That's still a thing.
Do you need to annotate that anymore? Is what I'm getting at. Like, or is it built into the language like that? There are guaranteed.
Well, there are certain things like you can't. Within the ARC model, you can't prevent retain cycles in certain scenarios without having the concept of a weak reference. And so, like, you know, right, what we've seen so far of Swift is we've seen the curated good stuff that demos well. We haven't seen like the ugly stuff that they have to have yet, you know, and it might get less pretty, but the fact is, like, I'm sure it'll be close enough. It'll be good.
They remove so much noise, like even just with type inference, which again, talking about last year was like, oh, they could add type inference to Objective-C. They kind of did, but like that wasn't the next thing on the list. But it's like part of the big giant language that incorporates everything you've seen before, and like getting rid of the types everywhere, getting rid of obviously retain release went away with ARC. You know, and I'm hoping like the silly annotations that needed for the compiler to figure out what to do. Like you said, you know, you probably need something to break cycles, but I don't know what that's going to look like. And it could be that they just have strong guarantees in the language. And if you know, it won't allow you to create cycles if you use the structures in this way. And if you create them in this way and you do create them, there's no way to break them. So just don't do that. We don't know yet.
I think they're still going to need it because like for certain delegate methods. Anyway, I'm sure they'll need it, but just.
You know what we learned today is that I feel like I learned today that Apple is not only floored, but they are standing on the gas. And so many things, like there are a bunch of things they talked about with regard to layout. So like if you're not doing auto layout, which I'm not, and I need to learn it, if you're not doing auto layout, you got to get on that train because you're getting left behind. If you're not using dot syntax, you got to get on that train or you're getting left behind.
Oh, you got to get on the Swift train, like Marco said, like learn Swift. And like we should talk about that section of State of the Union, which is apparently public, about what was it called? Size. What are they called?
Adaptive UI is their umbrella.
Yeah, right, but what are the like size modes or size?
Yeah, it was. I mean, they were basically, you know, they were like screaming with a megaphone of subtlety.
We are making a bigger iPhone. Get ready, and also possibly side by side apps on the iPad, but we're not sure yet.
Get ready and get ready now.
Start using this stuff. Please. And I'm actually curious. I haven't even looked at the APIs. Like, I hope you don't have to use storyboards to get a lot of that.
Yeah, I don't think you do. I think that's just like you could do it all in code. It's just the storyboard is the way to lay it out. And it may be complicated to do in code, but yeah, like we said on the previous show, it could be that they just don't say anything about these things and just have a bunch of APIs about making your app different sizes. They totally do. Like, just there was a long section of that thing about that.
And it was extremely awkward because they were dancing all around the fact that they're basically saying there are bigger iPhones coming, prepare yourselves.
Yeah. And even the side-by-side app things, which require exactly the same thing. And like their sizes were like so vague. It was like compact vertically, compact horizontally. Like it was just forget about resolution. Like it's all.
I'm telling you, they're making a square iPhone because there's a new you can do square.
Yeah, well, that was the iWatch. It was a gigantic square watch.
That's it.
No, but like I mean, this is another example where Android, I think from the beginning, would always had kind of like your UI could be any size because our phones are we're not going to control the size, so your UI better adapt. So you have like a bag grid type of things where you put items in constraints. And Apple was just like the iPhone is here, it's fixed. This fixed pixel size is just deal with it, right? And they worked over the series of 8 releases to slowly creep up on this concept. And what they've come up with is kind of a weird mongrel of like half fixed layout, half auto layout, and people in the transition. But during that whole period, they had the right product for the right time. And now is finally the right time for what Android was at from the beginning, which is like, look, you're not going to know what size your device is. Try to make a UI that looks good everywhere. Apple made a UI that looks good in all of its previous devices. And now Apple's trying to show people how to continue to make UIs that look good in any size device, not, quote unquote, any size. And it's a difference in philosophy because, Android apps trying to make a UI that scales to any size and shape is really hard. And that's why a lot of Android UIs were weird, especially like the stretched out apps on the Android tablets and everything. Apple never did that. At every step of the way, Apple says, we have a way for you to make awesome looking apps in every possible size thing. And that way keeps changing as the number of sizes change. And this is the newest way. And it is the most complicated way, but it's still also the most capable.
But I think this way is also probably like the end game of that path, because first it was the springs and struts, just like a very, very basic model of scalable windows and views and everything. Then you have auto layout, which is much more advanced, but the main limitation with auto layout is like, without being all crazy with dynamic checks and everything, you basically were applying the same constraints, the same layout to a view regardless of what size it was. And now you have more of a concept of like responsive web design, which is like, all right, for this size class, you're going to use this set of constraints. For this size class, you're going to adjust them in this way, or you're going to use this entirely different set of constraints. Like that I think is like it's the end of that road, and they can make it better, but I think that's like the kind of system that they'll pretty much need for the next 15 years.
Because now all they have to do is add size classes.
Right.
I mean, the size classes in the beginning are stupid. It's like compact. What does that even mean? But they use the same constant values for the the enums or whatever the hell they are, and just keep adding size classes. And then it's like, well, now we have Apple that works on your wall size display with the new Apple wallpaper that you paint on in 2075, and that just has a different size class.
Yeah, why not? So we should probably wrap. But what do you think, Marco? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Are you excited? Are you happy? Are you disappointed? What do you think?
I'm extremely happy and excited. I'm a little afraid of my future workload.
Yeah.
But again, most of the things they've added, like I was afraid going into this, like, what if iOS 8 adds something ridiculous that I must have, and then I have to then delay my app until 8 ships. And I don't, assuming that you can get like the widgets types and all the embed type stuff, if you can get that conditionally compiled. The way you've been able to do it with previous versions, like if I can ship an app with the ship an app with the SDK when it ships, that I can have all these things but still be compatible with 7, then that's fine. I can still ship the app like this summer sometime. I don't have to wait until October or whenever. I do have a lot more work to do now with getting all this stuff supported by the time 8 ships, but I'm not like freaked out about having to massively change my plans. And the new things that they gave us are so good. I mean, they gave us so much of what we both wanted and never thought we'd get, that I'm just so excited to get it. I mean, and we're this week we're gonna be here for the next 4 days and learn about some of these things in sessions, but we're not going to get a full appreciation for it until we go home and start actually using these things. And that's going to happen over the span of months and years. And over months and years, we're all going to appreciate the scale of what we got today. Right now, it's still very new, and it's still going to take a lot of thought and experience with it before we realize the full effects.
Are you going to do the size class stuff so you're ready for the bigger iPhone?
Probably. I will probably do that once I make an iPad interface. That'll probably be part of that work. I haven't done that yet. I'm not going to launch, as far as I know, with an iPad version. So that'll probably come later, fall or winter or whatever.
All right. So John, how do you feel?
I'm kind of overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that they've put out there. I'm not sure, like, ostensibly all that I care about in these announcements is the OS X stuff, and I'm thinking about my review, and I still don't have that OS pinned down. I mean, I still haven't even used it. I don't really know what to make of that. People think, oh, this is going to be a big review, but my initial impression is that it's not going to be that big. It's going to be small, but I may be misled by the things that are OS X that are relevant to OS X that were presented in the other parts of the keynote. So I don't know yet. But Yosemite, it's interesting. It's strange. The Mac was due for a visual refresh. I'm not sure if I like it or not yet. I'll have to spend some time with it and see. But all the other stuff, I mean, I'm excited as a user about the iOS 8 stuff. I'm excited to use all the apps that people will make on iOS 8 that take advantage of these features. Like, really, this is iOS's time to shine. It's finally coming into its own, and that's what I'm excited about from a user perspective. And of course, the language stuff from an academic perspective seems like I mean, the never-ending nitpicking of Swift itself will begin once I learn what the heck, right? But bottom line is, like, they did it. They they've got a new language, and it may not have been the way I wanted it or all the things that I wanted out of a new language, but just merely the acknowledgement that it's not Objective-C forever, it just feels good.
Yeah. Now, like I said, I'm just so pleased to see that Apple is really moving, and they're moving quick. And sitting here now, I have no reason to doubt that any of this is going to work well. Ask me about this in 3 or 4 months when iOS 8 comes out and all this iCloud stuff actually happens, and maybe nothing works, and then I regret being excited about how quick Apple's moving. But sitting here now, it's really encouraging, and I'm really excited to play with all of this stuff, and it should be really awesome. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I really can't wait. This is they're clearly firing on all cylinders, and we didn't even mention the lack of hardware updates today, because the simple fact is it just didn't matter. Nope. They gave us so much on the software and dev tools end, which is appropriate for a developer conference. They gave us so much there that we're content for a while. I can learn Swift on my old crappy monitor. They've made me busy enough that I can temporarily forget for maybe the next couple of months. I can forget that we don't have Retina Thunderbolt screens yet, and thank goodness they didn't release a TV and a watch for us to also develop for this summer. Yeah. Come on.
No new category, but nobody cares. I mean, the thing is, like, at WWDC, the hardware announcements, as much as I love them, are a distraction from everything else, because for the rest of the week at the conference, they don't talk about the hardware. Like, it's all about software. This is a developers conference, and we love it when there's hardware and it's exciting and you see them in the little glass tube, but then they go away. And for the rest of the week, people are not talking about, I mean, maybe if they have Retina screens, that's a developer facing feature, but there's so much developer facing stuff. It's like this whole keynote was filled with stuff that the rest of the week is going to be filled with.
Yeah. And there was enough consumer stuff in there too, that it wasn't like, a PR disappointment for Apple today. I'm sure some site analyst is saying that Apple's doomed because they didn't release, an iUnicorn or whatever. But the fact is, I think most of the sensible places that are usually sensible about these things will see the value here for everyone, consumers and developers. And this is just showing that Apple does have hustle, like the real hustle. Like they do have massive engineering resources that they're just, they're not applying to things like Street View cars and everything else, but they are applying to different problems that we didn't get transit directions and maps and everything, and that stuff can come in time. I'm not trying to criticize Google for, because Google has engineering resources to spare. And that shows with their weird side projects, but their core stuff is still really good. This is showing that Apple can not only still compete on core stuff, just a different set of it. Not only can they still compete, but they can still compete really well, like really, really competitively. And they're raising the bar in so many areas that other companies and platforms aren't or lag behind in. And so Apple, I think, is fine. Yeah, they're doing great.
An end of a lull, I feel like. It's like there was a lull where we were making a lot of demands. We didn't even talk about all the App Store changes, but we were making a lot of demands and people wanted things, and Apple wasn't releasing it. And it's almost like a whole bunch of stuff all came out of the oven at once.
Yeah.
We don't know how long any of those things were baking in there, but the bottom line is they opened the oven doors and 50 cakes spilled out. And they're all done. They're all ready now. And, you may, from the outside, it'd be like, well, they must have heard what we complained about since iOS 7 and done all this stuff. So much of this stuff in this keynote must have taken more than a year. They just all came due at the same time. And so, I mean, and we haven't even gotten to new category TV. Forget about that stuff. There's a lot. This is a lot of their sort of quiet period of just doing small incremental things. And arguably, it ended with iOS 7 making the big transition. But man, a lot of stuff came out today. A lot of big things that we wanted for a long time.
Yeah, it was really awesome, and I'm so stoked for the rest of the week. So thank you so much to Jason Snell and the people of Macworld for letting us steal his studio for a while. It's extremely kind of you, so thank you. And we have some sponsors to thank.
And thanks a lot to our 3 sponsors this week: Warby Parker, Igloo, and Squarespace. And we'll see you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA, Siracusa. It's accidental, accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental, accidental. Tech podcast so long.
Man, we got a lot to talk about. But yeah, we will see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Or tomorrow on a different podcast, but whatever.
There's that too.